and I'm probably gonna get hate for this, so I need to approach this delicately. All right, Hana Ali quit medicine. She's so glad, and she actually left medicine for another career. For most of the other videos that we've reacted to on this channel, the person is leaving one job within medicine for another job within medicine. But here, Hana quit medicine entirely, so let's see what she has to say.
I left my career as a doctor and I left medicine, but I did it at a very, very awkward and strange time. And I remember working my butt off to try and get into med school. And then when I was 18, I got an offer from Manchester Medical School. And if you're not aware, in the UK, they do this really weird thing where they give you a conditional offer for a uni place. They say, if you get 3 A's in your exams, then we will accept you into our medical school.
Keep in mind the medical training process in the UK, and actually most other countries, is very different from the US. In the US, it's high school, then college for 4 years. After college is med school for 4 years. And in other countries like the UK, after high school, you do med school for 6 years. There's no college in between. Med school is essentially your college plus med school combined. Think of like the BSMD programs here in the US. That's essentially the same timeline. And I think the interesting thing here about having 3 A's to get in, I think for some people, if you're a good test taker, you probably think, wow, that's like such a relief. I don't have to worry about, you know, my letters of recommendation and all these other things. I just have to work hard on a test and perform well. But if you're not a good test taker, and remember, being a good doctor is not just about being a good test taker, right? It's not about just your knowledge, it's about the other factors too, because you can be a great doctor and not be good at taking tests, but you can also be bad at taking tests and a bad doctor, right? But for those who are not great test takers, obviously it's gonna add a lot of stress to the situation.
I took my exam and I kid you not, half a mark away from getting an A in one of my chemistry exams. And they didn't accept me. I was in Iraq at the time visiting family, and I just remember crying my eyes out, calling them, begging them, like, come on, it's half a mark. Let me into the medical school. I already did 2 hours worth of interviews. I did so many months worth of work experience and years of hard work. They didn't allow me. They didn't accept me into the medical school.
Which, I mean, that's kind of it's pros and cons, but that's part of the system. If they have a hard cutoff, you get these 3 A's. You gotta hit those 3 A's. If you miss it by half a point, then you miss it by half a point. I can't think of an entirely similar situation in the US, but one thing that does come to mind is when you're applying to medical school from college, if you have a really high MCAT, like back in the day, I think it was over a 38, which is probably like above a 520, I think, and you have over a 3.9 GPA, certain medical schools will just automatically give you an interview invite. It's not an acceptance, but you're automatically invited to an interview before they even review all of your application, as long as you have those 2 hard metrics above those thresholds, those very high thresholds.
I cried my eyes out. I was so defeated and depressed. Like, imagine working so many years for something and being half a mark away from it.
One thing I want to add here is that if you know there's a cutoff for something, you have to get a certain score, you better work your tail off and make sure you're hitting well above that cutoff, because on any exam, you're gonna hit a range on test day. So if you're hitting 510, 512, 511, on test day, you're probably gonna hit between 510 to 512, plus or minus 1 or 2 points. If you need to have at least 515, then you should be practicing and studying and getting to the point where you are safely beating that by a little bit of a margin, because there is gonna be some variation on test day, right?
I got accepted into Liverpool Medical School, and then I had to retake that exam, which I lost half a mark on. And lo and behold, I got nearly 4 marks on that retake. What's even more annoying about it was that if I had gone to Manchester Medical School, I would have paid only £3,000 per year in school fees. But since I had to wait a year, I went to Liverpool and paid £9,000, which meant that my student loans tripled what they should have actually been.
Damn, it is so much cheaper in the UK. £3,000 versus £9,000, and that's a 3-fold difference, but still the £9,000 is way cheaper than the US.
So I get into Liverpool Medical School and I start university in 2012 in the summer. I go to university, and obviously keeping in mind that I've been working so many years to get to this point, I've gone through rejections and failures, and I've still, you know, clawed my way back in.
And that's important. A lot of people are gonna have setbacks, they're gonna have failures, all of us, myself included. And it's not about whether or not you have the setback or the failure, it's about how you react to it, and whether you have the grit and you do claw back, like Hana just mentioned.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
So I get through the first year, and then the second year starts to get a little bit more difficult. I could keep up with the theory and the practicals and all of it. It wasn't that that was too hard for me. The work wasn't too hard. It was just that the people were too hard. Over the years, I came to realize that I just really didn't enjoy the level of toxicity and the level of competition and the level of actually, like, quite frankly, bullying that went on in the medical field. There are some absolutely amazing doctors, nurses, but there are also so many people that kind of get off on making you feel super belittled, and they get off on bullying. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because they had to go through it. Maybe they feel like that's the way that doctors need to be in order to teach other doctors. Maybe they're just stressed out. Maybe they hate their lives. I don't know.
There's two things here. Number one is that not all of medicine is like that. You're gonna have different cultures in different locations, different institutions. In the US, people often group it geographically. It's not a perfect way of doing it, but it's kind of rough approximations, which is that a lot of prestigious East Coast universities and programs tend to be more malignant, a little bit more hardcore, old school, toxic in that way. Whereas some of the California or West Coast are a little bit more relaxed. Again, not a hard and fast rule, but trends. So if you don't like the culture in one institution, don't write off all of medicine because a different institution might have a totally different culture. The second factor is your personality. Some people can handle it and may even thrive in it, and other people are really turned off by it. And that also actually influences specialty choice quite a bit, because you'll notice more of that culture with things like surgery and less of that with certain other specialties that are more lifestyle focused. Things like, maybe not even lifestyle focused, but things that are a little bit more relaxed. Something like family medicine or anesthesiology, not gonna have as much bullying or toxic nature as neurosurgery, for example.
And I never found myself for a single second going to sleep on a Sunday night and not dreading Monday morning. I always dread Monday morning.
Okay, never looking forward to work. That's a big red flag. If you're not looking forward to it at all, sometimes that might just be, there were certain rotations that I did not enjoy. I remember a lot of sexism in my OB-GYN rotation, a lot of anti-male, like overt, very explicit commentary with me just standing there, and then, you know, the residents talking, "Oh, sorry, Kevin," and I'm just like awkwardly standing there like, this is completely inappropriate.
But why?
So yeah, rotations like that I didn't enjoy, but hopefully for most of you who are pursuing medicine and medical school, there are at least some rotations that you do really enjoy and things that you are looking forward to. And maybe it's just a tough team, and as soon as you get assigned to a different team, you know, maybe within OB-GYN, I had to do 2 or 3 different locations. Yeah, the second location, I'm looking forward to getting away from this first location, as an example.
I remember a time when I was in my 4th year of medical school and I was shadowing a senior doctor, and he was in a clinic with a consultant and they were looking at an x-ray, and the consultant was asking him a question. And this is like a grown man answering the question. He must have been like 40, 45, something like that. And he answered the question with hesitation, and the consultant just ripped him to shreds. He was so condescending, so rude, so belittling. By this point, it was like my 4th year, and it was actually around my 3rd year that I started realizing that maybe this wasn't for me. My mental health dipped really badly. I dipped into depression. I had really bad anxiety, and I was just really starting to struggle a lot. And it wasn't really that I couldn't make it through the 5 years. It was more so that I felt like this was going to be the rest of my life.
So if you're facing depression and anxiety in the middle of your medical training in medical school, then yeah, focus on your mental health and take some time off or do what you need to do. She made a comment right here that it's not that she couldn't do it for 5 years, it's that she thought that the rest of her life was gonna be like this. Generally, your training, those are known to be your hardest years, whether it's med school, residency. Your attending life is generally very different. This consultant getting yelled at when they're 45, this person was, you know, maybe they started med school training later in the process, etc. But there's also no shame in saying, hey, I'm burned out, I don't want to do this for 5 years, and I quit. You don't have to justify things any more than just saying you're not happy and you don't like it. And that's totally fine.
So by this point, I had spent a lot of time thinking about, do I really want to stay in this career, and should I persevere or should I just leave? And it was only thanks to my sister, who basically was my therapist throughout that whole time. And she essentially forced me to stay in until I got the degree. She was like, keep going, just get the degree and then you can take it from there. So I mustered up all my strength and courage to just make it till the 5th year, pass every exam, and then get my degree, graduate, and then take it from there.
I actually get a lot of people who reach out to me, whether it's through LinkedIn or through my website where they send a message, or even on Instagram, and a lot of them are asking something similar like, hey, I'm in medical school, or I'm in residency, or I'm even attending, and I'm looking at quitting. Here's what I'm thinking, can you help me out? And I just get so many that I actually created a whole video, like the stepwise process as to how I think about it from an organized, systematic perspective. And for most people, I tell them something similar, which is that there are many upsides to completing your medical school training, at least getting your MD, even if you do not want to complete residency. Of course, there are some instances where you should not finish med school, and again, that's linked in that earlier video.
Usually what happens is that medical students, after they graduate, they go on to do something called foundation training. Most people do those 2 foundation years.
So foundation training for those in the US, it's essentially like, it's 2 years and it's essentially like MS4, so end of med school year plus intern year. And the reason I say that is after you graduate med school in the US, you join a residency generally in your specialty. So in plastic surgery, even in my intern year, I still did 3 months of plastic surgery training because it's a plastic surgery program. And in my 4th year of med school, I'm doing sub-Is, multiple rotations, focused, acting almost like an intern, right? A sub-internship in my specialty of interest. And in the UK, your foundation training is just like general broad training, and then you specialize after. So again, think of it as like between 4th year and intern year kind of process.
Couldn't fathom the thought of just another year for basically the rest of my life. So I tried to be sensible about it. I went to my careers advisor, absolutely not helpful at all. She gave me like information on what people do outside of medicine if they're not doctors, and it was like management, consulting.
There are a lot of things that you can do if you do not want to continue in medicine. And again, we have a whole video on that up here and linked in the description.
I don't even know what else. It was just like these 4 or 5 things that didn't speak to me at all and I did not want to do. So she wasn't helpful. My family also wanted me to push through. So I had to make the decision by myself, and it was such a difficult decision to make.
It is a really difficult decision to make. And I remember speaking with a therapist for like 10 weeks, having 1 session per week before I made my decision, because I was like, hey man, here's what I'm thinking. I think I'm being logical about it. Here's my spreadsheet. Here are the pros and cons. Here is how I've done this fear setting exercise, and I've talked to these mentors, and these are the notes I've taken. And I was coming at it from a very like analytical perspective. But as you learn in medical school, this rationalization and overly relying on logic is sometimes also a coping mechanism. So I'm like, oh my God, am I like coping? Is this bad? Is this good? Like, I don't want to make a decision I'm going to regret. So I think talking to that therapist and getting clarity, he's like, no, Kevin, like, based on what you're telling me, you know, you're talking about the risk, you're talking about the upside, the downside, like this seems to make sense. And I think obviously in my situation, the calculus worked out that, yeah, it made a lot of sense, things worked out. But I think actually having someone to talk it through with is super beneficial because it's a massive decision and you want to make sure that you don't have any major blind spots.
At the time, I was working for free remotely for a health tech startup that was based in Berlin. And I thought to myself, go big or go home. If I'm gonna leave, I might as well do something like super crazy and just go for it. So I went to Berlin and I met the people who run the startup and I asked them, hey, do you have a full-time position for me by any chance? And luckily they said yes.
I love that. If you don't ask, you're never gonna get a yes, right? And what's the worst? If you do ask, they say no. I love that. Just ask. Sometimes the simplest stuff is really the best.
I thought at the time was the unthinkable thing to do. I moved by myself to Berlin in Germany, where I knew absolutely no one. I didn't know a lick of German. And I just thought to myself, why the hell not?
Hell yeah, life's an adventure.
Within the first month, I knew within my soul that I had made the right decision, because I would go to sleep every night, be absolutely ecstatic about going to work the next morning. And I truly did not think I could ever feel that way, because up until this point, all I had felt was dread and anxiety. And to have that feeling, I will never forget. And I know that I never want to go back to having that feeling of dread and anxiety.
I think that alone is huge. I mean, that means she completely made the right decision. And I mean, should she have quit sooner? I don't know, maybe, but I don't know if she would have gotten this job without it. So maybe things worked out perfectly for her. Maybe things could have been better. I don't know the details. Obviously, my reasons for quitting and my relationship to medicine were different than hers, and it wasn't as much dread and anxiety of going in, you know, the night before or the morning of. But I still do recall this really open, hopeful, optimistic feeling of tabula rasa. As of today, the future is just this blank canvas. And now I don't have a definite job. I don't have any deadlines in the future. This is so weird. This is a very strange space to be in. It's freedom, it's liberation, it's uncertainty, there's a little bit of fear, there's a lot of excitement, that's for sure. I got this whole future ahead of me. There's no plan, there's no like arbitrary goals and landmarks and timelines. I got these businesses, I got some visions, and I'm gonna run with them. And that was super exciting. Still is.
And as it came up to me leaving Berlin and going back to work as a doctor in the UK, every fiber of my being was telling me, this is the wrong decision for you. I didn't feel a single shred of excitement. All I felt was dread and anxiety.
Yeah, you gotta listen to your gut. I mean, if you're just when it's that black and white, I don't think it's a very challenging decision.
I rejected my offer to be a F1 doctor and I decided to stay in Berlin for another year. And I had researched and I knew by this point if you had graduated and it's been 2 years since your graduation, that it's still relatively easy for you to retrain and come back. But after 2 years, it gets more difficult. But by the 2-year mark, I just knew I could never go back. So I stayed in Berlin. Things at that startup got a little bit toxic. So I ended up leaving.
Okay, so we're gonna come back to that. She mentioned that her work in Berlin became toxic too. So let's let her finish up, but I have something I wanna circle back on there.
Since then, I've been an entrepreneur, mainly working on building social enterprises. I love my career. I've never found more sense of purpose than I have with what I do.
Awesome.
And I'm so thankful that I made the incredibly difficult decision to just walk away when my gut and my instinct told me to walk away. So I really want to encourage you to just do what feels true to you. Because had I stayed in medicine, because everyone had told me to basically stay, I'm pretty darn sure that I would be absolutely miserable right now.
So a couple takeaways from this video. I mean, I agree with her final point, which is that if things are that black and white for you, like you have depression, anxiety, and you hate it, and there aren't even any rotations you look forward to, there's no real part of it that you're looking forward to. It's not just a bad rotation that's making you unhappy, it's just everything that is making you unhappy. I don't think it should be that challenging of a decision, but I think a lot of us, we make it more challenging than it needs to be because we just care way too much what other people think. And so many of us would be way happier if we just gave fewer fucks. And I know, I mean, obviously we're all wired differently, and ever since I was younger, I've been wired in a way where I don't value other people's opinions about my life as much as the average person, which is mostly a blessing, more so than a curse, I think. And for me, when I was making my decision, like co-residents or other people in medicine no longer respecting me or seeing me as highly, I don't give a fuck. Like even my family, I know that my family's gonna love me no matter what, so I didn't even ask them. Like I told them what I was doing after I made my decision. And as I said on other videos, my mom was like, "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Okay, good, you worked too hard," because she knew that I was burning the candle at both ends. So care less what people think, and a lot of the decisions in life will get easier. The second thing, and I'm probably gonna get hate for this, so I need to approach this delicately. She mentioned in medicine, it felt like there's a lot of toxic nature, a lot of competitiveness, a lot of like, I don't know, that's not very common in US medical schools. I don't know what the culture is in the UK. A lot of US medical schools are pass-fail the first 2 years, clerkship, the 3rd and 4th year, your clinical years, they are graded, but you tend to see a much more collaborative nature. Not at every school, but at most schools, it's more collaborative than cutthroat. Some pre-med programs are pretty cutthroat though. So then what caught my attention is that she said that the place in Berlin also became toxic. And one thing we always need to be careful of too is, God, I hope this analogy is not lost on people. If I walk around and I feel like everyone around me is an asshole, I'm probably the asshole. So I do think part of it, and especially in this day and age, this is like a super touchy thing. We want to have self-respect and a certain level of self-dignity, right? We're not gonna tolerate being treated in a certain way, but we also need to be resilient. And trying to find that balance is difficult. And if you're quick to find the struggle, the assholes, the issues everywhere you go, that might mean that you need to focus more on your own resilience and your own tools to cope with those and to deal with them, right? And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case here with Hana. I don't know Hana at all, but this is an important thing to mention, I think, in today's climate. Because in today's climate, it's like, hey, my emotions are the truth, and therefore if I feel this way, I'm justified in doing so, when not necessarily. And it's probably not that big of a surprise. I think a lot of people who go into surgery aren't that bothered by the toxic bullying nature, because for those who it works well with, they tend to see it as, it's not ideal, right? It's not like, oh, I'm so excited to like get yelled at or like feel like shit because I don't know something. You know what, I'm just gonna leave it as, you don't see it as negatively as a lot of other people do, because I think if I start justifying it and talking about some of the silver lining, then it's just gonna be taken the wrong way. The culture of medicine in the US and in other countries needs to be changed and improved, but I see that as things like the attending should never, no matter what, without exception, throw a loaded scalpel at a resident, which yes, has happened in the US at a program that I'm not gonna mention the program, but like those things are completely unacceptable. Attendings putting residents and med students in unsafe situations, causing them to get a needle stick, which happened to me once, also not acceptable. Using residents as cheap labor and not focusing on their education, but just working them 80+ hours a week, even though you're not supposed to go over 80 hours a week, not acceptable. Like these are the things that we need to focus on. But the culture of pimping and belittling, and you see that more in some specialties than others. And because of that, it's not as widespread as a lot of people make it out to be. I think that based on your personality and tendencies, you can choose a specialty that has less of that. So I don't know if that is necessarily as high of a priority as other things. Should it be improved? Yes, but is it number one on my list? Probably not. I'm probably gonna get some hate for that in the comments, but I'm really happy for Hana. It looks like she made a decision that's right for her. She's happy. Let me know your guys' thoughts with a comment down below. Please keep it civil, guys. Much love, and I'll see you all in that next one.